Okay. Hello. Mabuhay. Welcome. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Emily Porcincula Lawsin, and I'm calling in from occupied Kickapoo land in Fort Worth, Texas, while I teach Asian American Studies and Women's and Gender Studies remotely at the University of Michigan. I am the national president of the Filipino American National Historical Society, and FANHS is honored to be partnering today with Pinayista to present today's panel, Pinay Activistas, the history and future of Filipino American activism. October is Filipino American History Month, and the hashtag FAHM 2020 theme is the history of Filipino American activism. I'll try to share a screen with you. FANHS encourages organizations and communities across the United States to incorporate this theme of commemorating the history of Filipino American activism in their History Month events. We also encourage everyone to share their stories of Filipino American activism in their life at hashtag FAHM 2020 on social media, including Instagram, Twitter, and our Facebook page. See if I can share this. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, maybe not. Let me see if I can see it. Sorry. The recognition of Filipino American History Month in October commemorates the first recorded presence of Filipinos in what is now known as the continental United States, which occurred on October 18th, 1587, when Luzones Indios came ashore from the Spanish galleon and landed at what is now known as Morro Bay, California. In 2009, the United States Congress recognized Filipino American History Month, and the late Dr. Fred Cordova, one of my mentors, along with his wife, FANHS founder and executive director, Dr. Dorothy Ligo Cordova, first introduced October as Filipino American History Month in 1992 with a resolution from the FANHS National Board of Trustees. In light of momentous historical events and current issues that affect Filipino Americans, the FANHS Board of Trustees chose the history of Filipino American activism as the 2020 theme to highlight the myriad ways Filipino Americans have participated in social justice movements across multiple decades, which we hope to hear about on today's panel. We honor the history of Filipino American solidarity with other communities in their fights for our equity and justice, including the Black Lives Matter movement, American Indian movement, civil rights and voting rights movement, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, disability rights, and environmental justice rights, just to name a few. This year, we recognize the advocacy of our Filipino American healthcare workers who are actively protecting and fighting for our lives every day amidst the global pandemic. We believe that this theme is particularly crucial in 2020, as it is a key election year, and we are living amidst a pandemic or multiple pandemics and a mass movement towards racial justice. On this panel, we reflect on decades of Pinay Activistas, the history and future of Filipino American activism. Let me try to share my screen. I don't know if you see it or if I could go.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I can't see you, so you could just tell me in my if you can see it. Okay. There we go. There's the hashtags if you'd like to follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm going to start with a poem and bring into the space my comadre. Do y'all know what a diva is? You will now. Diba, D-I-B-A, loosely translates to mean right or isn't it so in Filipino. This is adapted from the poem Mare is a Diva, which I wrote in 1995 for Don Mabalon and other Pinay activists who were organizing to save Tagalog classes at UCLA. It's the poem that Don and Alison Tintianco Cubales cite in their classic poem, Resistance and Struggle Are Sisters. They performed an adapted version of that at my wedding, and I performed an adapted poem for Don and Jesse Gonzalez's wedding on this day, 11 years ago, October 10th, 2009. This is called Mare Don is a Dr. Diva, in memory of Dr. Don Bohulano Mabalon, August 17th, 1972 to August 10th, 2018. We called her Mare, as in comadre, our sister friend. Not sister, my friend, but sister friend, said all in one. She's the award-winning professor, poet, journalist, writer, author, historian, film producer, activista, organizer, Bye-Bye Landiwada, healer, leader, warrior, fighter, daughter, sister, manang, niece, auntie, ninang, mama, partner, asawa, god sister, cousin, pinsan, comedian, foodie, baker, aklanon, Pinay, princessa, Stockton queen, and multi-talented, multitasking woman who defied our Filipino American history, not a stereotype of popularity, not a bubbling, babbling BIT of a Chiquita banana, yellow face, white bread mentality, but the Pinays resistance and struggle that is reality. In totality, it ain't no wonder she crushed the violent patronizing of anyone using heritage and erasing history. She thwarted corporate developers' plans to bulldoze Little Manila and flushes them down the toilet. It's not enough. So she conquered Stockton streets, telling the city council that we can wage a massive protest and win historic designations, provided she keeps us on the move. Mare was a diva. So instead of walking us in your typical circles, she sent us in lightning moving spirals like tornadoes, whipping unshielded storefronts. Mare was a diva. Mare is more than a WOMB man, with her Star Wars saber-like tongue, gleaming brown skin, and charcoal eyes. She burned fire into the souls of Pinoy folk, making us look back at women legends of the PI, not including Imelda, the crooked shoe queen, of course. So we studied Maganda, meaning beautiful, who was stronger than Eve. She was the first diva of all divas, who killed the bird that mocked at the bamboo of her man, and Gabriela Silang of yesterday and today, a true revolutionary, the real live woman warrior before Maxine Hong Kingston made it fiction. But Mare is more than a teacher, Diva. She's the mother of all lands that resist using our bodies as bases of war. She is like a book of ages and time that can't stand still. She is a roaring river who don't need to beg to be heard. She was the strong waves of her story, of our revelations, of our liberation. Don Mabalon is in the heart. She lives in our hearts forever. Mare, Dr. Don Bohulano Mabalon is a diva. Yes. I hope you're snapping. All right. I need to take a breath. Calling my Mare Don into the space here. We're really fortunate to have join with us today panelists from all over and from different decades. And the panelists have been given some critical questions to think about, to talk about today. I'm going to do popcorn style and put out one question at a time and see who wants to answer it. Okay. And if you don't want to answer it, you can pass the popcorn over to the next person. But I'll introduce you to them first. In my screen, she appears in the left. I don't know if it appears in your left bottom screen too. My manang, Cindy Domingo, I've known for years because our parents were friends in Seattle and part of the Philippine War Brides Association and part of the Filipino community of Seattle. And she's most well known for her anti-martial law movement with the KDP. And she has a book out on that topic, which I hope she will show and share in a few minutes. Our other speaker in the top right is Caroline Cabading, who is the executive director of the Manilatown Heritage Foundation in San Francisco, most well known for their work in the International Hotel. And Caroline has a lot of other hats, and actually all of us have a lot of other hats, but these are just our main monikers right now. They could talk a little bit about that. And then in the bottom right of my screen, coming to you from California as well, right, is Kirin Macapugay, who is from the California Commission on Asian Pacific Islander Affairs and is the founder of API Community Actions and the co-founder of Indigenous Knowledge, Art, and Truth. So please join me in giving a warm Pinayista welcome to our Activistas on today's panel. All right, our first question, and I think we're limiting ourselves to 2 minutes for each question. I don't want to do a timer, but maybe somebody could do one in our chat here. But I will try to signal you if you're over time. What current organizing efforts are you currently engaged in your respective cities and regions? So we didn't figure out an order, but I will let you figure that out now. What current organizing efforts are you currently engaged in your respective cities and regions? Cindy, do you want to start? I think we should go.
Okay.
Eldest.
All right. First of all, thank you, Emily, for asking me to be on this panel. It's quite an honor and great to meet the other panelists. So obviously, this is the most important election all of us will ever face in our lifetime. And so I am heavily involved in the elections and working for the Democratic nominee, obviously against Trump, because there's nothing more important at this time but fighting against white supremacy, Nazism, and to ensure that we defend our democracy in the United States and internationally. And obviously also this period is very special because of the pandemic. So I am doing work around the pandemic, not only in terms of immediate needs for our communities, but also have joined a new formation called the Alliance in the Seattle area, which is made up of immigrant and refugee organizations and people of color, because those are communities most disproportionate impacted by the pandemic. And I continue to do work that I have done over the last 20 to 40 years, and that's international solidarity work. Also within the context of the pandemic, I do work around Cuba solidarity work. I continue to do work around the Philippines, so badly needed, because we are a transnational immigrant community, both made up of Filipino Americans as well as Filipino immigrants. And it is so important that we continue to support the people in the Philippines in their struggle to defend democracy and to fight an authoritarian regime. So, and I continue to do work around workers' rights through the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance and another organization, LELO, a legacy of equality, leadership, and organizing. And at the same time, I'm continuing to write about the issues I work on, and I just want to continue to push our books, Time to Rise, which is the history of the KDP, as well as Women Against Marcos, which is about women and their role in fighting a dictatorship back in the 1970s. So even though I retired in December, I am very, very busy, and I don't even know how I ever managed to go to work today.
Thank you. Thank you, Manning Cindy. Everybody should buy those books and read them. I mean, it's not every day that you see those kind of activist books by women, especially by Pinays. And so we need to support those so we can have more. Let's educate ourselves and support our sisters in this struggle. Caroline?
Hi, Emily. I'm here in San Francisco and hopefully reaching out to the whole world. The Manilatown Heritage Foundation and our home, the International Hotel Manilatown Center, is redoubling our efforts as a history organization to preserve and interpret history, basically because we feel that understanding causation, especially in this core American story of racism and the struggle for justice, is particularly important right now. And we feel that addressing contemporary issues by offering examples of historical resilience and creativity of our people rising to meet challenges in the past is the way that we can open up cross and multi-generational conversations. So we've been producing, planning, and presenting and documenting and preserving these conversations that that bring multiple generations together and tell this story and bring it relevant to the struggles that we're going through today. And I'm really happy to say that Remember, Recover, and Reclaim, our program that does that, which we have basically started producing at the beginning of the pandemic, is produced, planned, and programmed by 3 generations of Filipino American women. So we are working together across generations to make this programming happen and to start that conversation within our community that all generations are talking to each other.
That's awesome. I love that. You all are our sister organization of FANHS, and we totally believe in that intergenerational format. And so we're here to support you in any way possible. A shout out to my cousin, who's now I think, president of your board. Hey, Eleanor. All right. Our next speaker, Kirin, do you want to hit it?
Absolutely.
What current organizing efforts are you currently engaged in?
Sure. So I'll start off locally, and I'll let you know what we're doing across the state and internationally too.
Do you want me to share your slides now or later?
It's okay. It's okay.
Later.
Thank you, though.
Go ahead.
It's good. Thank you. So here in San Diego, there are a couple of efforts. The organization that I found, Asia Pacific Islander Community Actions, we continue to support the Kuya Ate mentorship program. They are an effort of educators and grassroots community organizers who are now looking to integrate more of an organizing educational component for the schools here in San Diego. We also are now supporting People's Collective for Justice and Liberation. So shout out to DJ Cotton Candy and Gregory Sandanian. I think you'll hear from Candy tomorrow. I'm also part of the San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition. So this group of nonprofits and community members came together in response to the COVID-related anti-Asian attacks we were seeing here in San Diego, and I know it's happening all across the US. A couple of my friends were personally assaulted and accused of bringing coronavirus. So we came together, we pushed resolutions through the city of San Diego, and we also helped make suggestions to the county of San Diego to adopt resolutions and commissions and advisories that address racism, and not just anti-Filipino, anti-Asian hate, but hate all across the board. So whatever we can do to emphasize that for all our communities here has been key. I'm also very excited to now be part of the Fierce Coalition. So that is with the Bulasan Center, Lead Filipino, Asian Solidarity Collective, and organizations all throughout the state of California. We just pushed out a policy recommendation deck because we know people are voting now, and it's important that our communities are informed. So that's another piece of work. And then finally, the ICAT, Indigenous Knowledge, Art, and Truth, we are working to really educate the public on some grave misconceptions about Indigenous peoples from the Philippines, and also provide some insight and advice on people's decolonizing journey here. So it's a lot of work, like everyone else. We're really honored to do it and to be here with you all.
Thank you. A lot of good work.
Yeah.
Good work. Thank you. All right, our next question is, who are the Pinays then and now at the forefront of social change and liberation for you, okay? Who are the Pinays then and now at the forefront of social change and liberation? And I just want to shout out and bring into the space some of my mentors, Dr. Dorothy Ligo Cordova, who I mentioned before, who started FANHS and who really had the inception of the first Filipino Far West Convention almost 50 years ago. I also want to bring into the space other folks who have transitioned on, like Dr. Dom Abalin I had mentioned. My mentor is Dr. Steffi San Bonaventura, who was a scholar, but also made pathroads into activism as a scholar. And so I will come up with some others later, but I'll have you all kind of just chime in. Who are the Pinays then and now at the forefront of social change and liberation?
You know, I had to think about this question because, you know, we don't have the kind of stars that other people think about when they're naming names. And but I think it's because it's the generation that I came from also. When I think about who are those people at the forefront, women who were and continue to be at the forefront of social change and liberation. I think about some of the women Emily and I knew from the Filipino community, people like Zenaida Gerson,
Yes.
Natty Carlisle.
Yes.
But I also think about and our own mothers.
Our own mothers.
There are our heroes.
Yes.
And so because that's whose shoulders we stand on. But at the same time, I think about today, and Emily mentioned the essential workers, and I see Filipino women standing solid healthcare workers, the stratification of healthcare workers, Filipino nurses, as well as the environmental service workers, Filipino women who come in and clean the rooms, who mop the blood off the floor, clean the rooms after COVID patients have been there. They are essential but uncelebrated. I think about the service workers in the hotels and the food service, as well as our teachers, how many Filipino teachers there are that are teaching our children and doing childcare. And then I think about the Filipino women I know who are labor organizers who are trying to empower those Filipino women to use their voice and their actions to empower themselves during this whole period of the pandemic. So important. And those are my heroines in terms of being on the forefront of social justice, social change, and liberation.
Thank you. And love to your mama. Love to your mama. Yeah, you're so lucky. Caroline?
A couple of my mentors and sheroes from the 70s were Dr. Estela Habal. Yeah. She was an original defender of the I Hotel, a San Jose State University professor of Asian American Studies and Women's Studies, and the author of San Francisco's International Hotel, Mobilizing the Filipino American Community in the Anti-Eviction Movement. I believe this is the definitive book on the I Hotel story, and without her, we would not have the story told from our perspective as Filipino Americans. And as many people may know, there is a lot of appropriation around this story, and so it's she is a hero, a shero for having written that book, and not a lot of people know that she was one of the power bases of that struggle. Jeanette Lazam was an activist tenant of the I Hotel, chose as a young woman to move into the I Hotel because, as some of you may know, this was not a struggle of benevolent people helping, people in the hotel. This was tenant run. And so in order for you to be a part of that, you needed to become a tenant. And she moved in as a young person, and she was a tenant. She was a power base from within. She was is a lifelong human rights activist, and she was an aide to Congresswoman Barbara Lee. And then finally, I bring up these women because they're powerful, smart, sharp women that really did the real work. They were my mentors growing up. And a lot of people don't know about them. So that's why I'm really happy to be talking about them. Juanita Tamayo Lott.
Yes, I was going to say her too. So thank you.
Participant in the Third World Strike and key in the development of the School of Ethnic Studies, a writer of several scholarly works on the Asian American community, and directed the Asian American Division of the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and worked for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights as Deputy Director of the Women's Rights Program Unit. Particularly Juanita, standing for us as an example of you do need to protest, you do need to fight the fight, but you also need to learn how to work within those institutions to make real change for your people. And so those are my three wonderful women that are my models and my mentors. And for now, it's like I agree with Cindy that like the heroes of today are the frontline teachers, medical professionals. So much of our community is actually represented by these people. But I will do a shout out to Angelica Cabading, who works in the South of Market with the South of Market Community Action Network, a sister who's really smart. Her heart is right there for the community. She does not leave. She's always doing real programs, mobilizing people, but making sure that her connection to the community, her heart is there, and she cares for the people living there and the families living there. So she's my hero of today that I wanted to feature.
I love it. I'm glad you brought up Dr. Juanita Tamayo Lott, because she and Cindy Domingo and Auntie Dorothy Cordova and others, Uncle Slogo Rigor, will be speaking tomorrow on Sunday, October 11th, as part of the FANHS Seattle Chapter, FANHS National, and Wing Luke Museums panel on activism. So if you don't get enough today, continue tomorrow. Look at wingluke.org for that. I also want to recognize my comadre, my Mare, out of Detroit. You talked about today's activists. Some of you may know Aurora Harris. She's an Afro-Filipino poet, Blackapina, she says, poet and activist in Michigan. She's the president of our FANHS Michigan chapter. She's most well known right now for her work around the water crisis in Detroit, and is just my model and my Mare, and an amazing activist in Black and Asian American communities in the city of Detroit. Thank you. Kirin?
Hi. So I've been fortunate, like you mentioned, to thank our mothers. I had an auntie in particular I always think about, who passed away a couple of years ago, Dominica Gunawa. She co-wrote the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of the Philippines. I always think about her because she reminds me that whatever work I do has to have some kind of collective impact and collective liberation, not just for my family and my people, but for all marginalized people. So I think about her, and I think about the dear friends that I'm so blessed to call my friends. I think about Candy Marie Obanya, my dear friends who started BLM San Diego and March for Black Women San Diego. To echo Manang Cindy, I'm always cognizant of the people who we don't have in these rooms and in these events. In San Diego, we have 250,000 Filipinos, and the majority of them are blue collar. They work in hospitals, they are our nurses, they are domestic workers who we never get to hear from. So anytime I think about the work we do, I always think about how it's benefiting them in particular. And then finally, I do want to shout out the next generations, the young girls, people like Margin Nicole, who I'm organizing Indigenous peoples with, Jalen over in Stockton, Leah, a lot of these other younger women who remind me constantly that we're doing this work because we want to leave a better world for future generations. And if we're not listening to them, then we need to check how we're doing our organizing and our activism. So I want to shout out this next young generation of Pinays as well, because they're why we do this work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. We have 5 more questions and about 20 more minutes. So we're gonna get through it though. And if we really have to do popcorn at the end, we will. Okay. Third question, and I think Caroline and Cindy wanted to address these. What are the differences in organizing from the 1970s and now in 2020?
Cindy, I'll defer to you first. I actually didn't ask for this question, but then I'll answer it. But if you ask for it, and actually, I do have a little bit to say about it, but I'll defer to you.
Okay. Before I go on to that question, I want to mention because you talked about the workers in Southern California, and Johanna Hester is a very powerful labor leader that should really be uplifted and her work. So I just want to mention her.
As is your niece, Ligaya Domingo, for her work with SEIU in Seattle.
Yes. So the differences in organizing, I think I wanted to highlight maybe 3 or 4. First of all, the difference in technology. Many of you probably never even saw a typewriter or ever used a typewriter.
I did. Mimeograph, the mimeograph machine. We used to have at the FYA. Yes,
right.
We did.
Oh my God.
Purple ink.
And so the torture and the time that used to be put in to do a flyer, to type up something, just took excruciating time relative to what it takes now. And then even to communicate, to be able to do something like this, a conference like this, or to do Zoom webinars to educate people from all over the world in one spot was something that we could not do. I mean, we could barely make a phone call because it was so expensive at that time. And so as a result of technology, our world is much smaller, and we are really able to build international solidarity and a movement in a way that we have never been able to do in the past, and to mobilize people to, Black Lives Matter. I mean, the ability in a day or two to bring thousands of people together is quite amazing. And while technology has a very bad side to it, it also has a very positive side. And then that's really up to us to figure out how to make it more positive than negative. On the other hand, I think what also is very different is just the political climate, how capitalism, imperialism has changed over the decades. I mean, really, you see the power of corporations much more now. Governments are just pawns to the corporations, and governments, depending on who's in control, whether it's the people's movement or, bought off politicians, corporations are controlling the world. We see this in terms of how much profit corporations are making. I read something about how many millions of dollars Amazon makes within just a minute. 1 minute in this world, millions of dollars. And so I think what's really different is our ability to organize. We need to figure out how are we going to organize against the corporations. And we have the technology to do it internationally now, and to have an understanding of what are the issues. I think, obviously organizing under this pandemic is very different. We've never had to do organizing, staying at home, doing all our organizing in this way. It's a very different way of organizing. Oftentimes it's very isolating. It's our mental health is suffering. But, gatherings like this really energize us and bring us together as, under a common ground. And then last of all, I think what's also different is being able to build a generational movement. When we were growing up in the 60s and 70s, we had a hard time finding the progressives in our community. Many, just the older generation who came during the 30s, 20s to the 40s were all were Hermanos. And the radicals in that movement who organized in the labor movement and the community they had been silenced during the 1950s, during the McCarthy era. And so we had to go out and look for them. And there was one, there was two, there was three, maybe five. Not like today, my generation is still alive. And, that's one of the impetuses to write our history, A Time to Rise, about the KDP, so that people could talk to us, could build that relationship, so that we could learn from both of us. Both sides could learn from each other. We made mistakes, we can learn from the mistakes, but at the same time, we can hand down experiences. We can learn from the younger generation. I mean, we're really three generations now that can learn from each other. I heard a quote of, if you don't have a mentor, was it you? Okay, you don't have a mentor? Okay, thank you. That was great. That was I thought about that for a little while. I thought, that's so true. That's so true. I learn so much from young women. And have to rethink a lot of my old actions, my old ideas, because they are my mentors too. So I really appreciated that thinking. I'm gonna promote that some more. So thanks.
Caroline? Thank you, Cindy.
The only thing that I would add to that, Cindy, that was like really wonderful, and I wasn't really thinking about a difference between the 1970s and today, except that just to remind people about the longevity of struggle. And that is one thing that the activists of the 1970s learned, is that you need to, this will be a long struggle. This will be never ending. As we can see, we've made so many strides and we still fight for the same things. And so knowing that it isn't, an instant gratification, a type of situation, that you're in it for your community for the long haul, and it may take, a long time. The International Hotel story is a story. We did not get that hotel rebuilt until about 42 years later. You need to last for that long. You need to take care of your health. You need to take care of your mental health. You need to have a sense of your community and how we support each other through this. And that's just one of the things I wanted to sort of bring up, because I wasn't an activist during the 70s, but I was mentored by them. And that was the biggest lesson, was that it's, in many ways, the activism is also quiet. It's for the long run, and it's deeply rooted in community to make the real change, the lasting change.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is, how do we understand or embrace diaspora while acknowledging intersectional identities and privileges of Filipinx in the United States and the Philippines? And I'm going to let Kirin start with this one. And if folks want to pass and go to the next one, we can do that after Kirin. Go ahead. Or if you don't want to answer it, Kirin, we'll go to.
No, that's okay. I think it actually comes from the previous question too. And I'm thinking about the other question that we were going to ask about how we need to organize in different spaces. And first of all, I want to acknowledge, and I appreciate, even though the title of this panel is Activista, I love that we have organizers on this panel, because there is a difference. Like Caroline had said, a lot of times the movement is quiet. You don't know who the organizers are, and you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
When the work is done, the people say we did it ourselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Silence is a weapon. Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I always think about that. And I also think about Saul Alinsky and his quote of saying every generation has to define for itself what it looks like. I didn't want to comment on organizing in the 70s. I didn't start until 2001 myself, even though my first door knocking experience was in 1994 after an incident in my neighborhood, and I wanted to rally my neighbors together. I was only 17 then. But to go back to your question, I have to say, living here in the United States, I'm always cognizant of the fact that I'm living my experience here. I don't have to live what our folks in the Philippines are experiencing every day. And when I do talk to folks in the Philippines, sometimes they say, you're fortunate over there. It's a different world over there. Let us have our say. So I think as organizers and advocates, if we're being asked to advocate on behalf of the community, that's one thing. And I think that's always important, is if we're going to raise up issues, or if we're going to play a role in supporting the people back home, they need to give us those marching orders and tell us what it is.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, even for those of you who've been doing so long, you come into a community and think, okay, this is ABC, I already know what plan we need to make, but we can never assume that because every situation is so different. So in our organizing work with ECOT, when I think about those of us who are in diaspora, the worlds who are living in diaspora, our Indigenous peoples, it's a completely different scenario from what they're going through in the Philippines. And the Indigenous experience in the Philippines is very different depending on what tribe you're from. Folks in the North are not experiencing the same level of deadly discrimination that folks in the South are. And I'm very cognizant of that as somebody who comes from the Northern Cordilleras. So long story short, it's not an easy question to answer. It really depends on what the effort is and what the people who are impacted the most have to say about how we play a role in supporting them.
Yeah.
Okay. Cindy, do you want to tackle it, or should we go to the next question?
I just wanted to say there was a young woman in the Pinays, defining Pinayism, Janelle. She got this question to the hilt, you know, in terms of the intersectionality of our communities and how to tackle privilege and what our role as cisgender straight women are for those in the LGBT community. And I just want to applaud her for her analysis and speaking to that point, because I think she really got it. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, our next question, and I think after this, we're just going to do popcorn real quick answers, okay? So this one is, how can activism be a way of building solidarity? Are there examples where this is working? How can activism be a way of building solidarity? Are there examples where this is working?
Well, I'll take it real quick. I mean, there is a type of activism called solidarity activism, right? So if activism is the policy of using vigorous campaigning to bring about political or social change, the solidarity activism focuses on consistent commitment to long-term community-centered change and improvement. And so solidarity activists work shoulder to shoulder with the communities to achieve positive progress. So that's what we're talking about here. And I guess that's the answer. The definition of solidarity activism is the answer of how you would do it is if you are working, say, like with the tribal people, that you're shoulder to shoulder, that you are being their advocates, that they are giving you their marching orders. You know, in the case, you know, I come back again to my legacy, the I Hotel, it was you were a tenant activist. You weren't a benevolent outsider, you know, helping these poor, unfortunate people. You were of them. So that's what solidarity activism is. And that's actually the kind of activism, in my opinion. You don't need to be from the community, you know, to have heart in the community, but you need to be in the community to make that kind of long change that is actually speaking from the people that you are trying to help.
Very good.
Not prescribing for them. Yeah.
Thank you, Caroline. Cindy or Kirin, do you want to try it, or should we go?
Well, I think activism always has to be centered in solidarity. I mean, it's an essential part, and it has to be not only domestically, but internationally. And as a result of, you know, what I was speaking about before in terms of the control of corporations, how working people all over the world, their issues are the same in many ways in terms of the degree of exploitation. We really need international solidarity as well. And we can play such an important part because we live in the belly of the beast. I mean, that is the role that we play here in the United States. Our privilege enables us to lobby Congress, to make those changes in U.S. foreign policy and domestic policy, because every international policy is connected to a domestic policy. And so we've seen how important it's played around the issue of the Philippines, South Africa, in terms of trade agreements, connecting the struggles of workers here in the United States with workers abroad. So absolutely, solidarity is an essential part of activism if we really want to change the world.
Excellent. Okay, we have about 5 minutes and 3 questions. So I'm going to do a technique that I learned from the amazing facilitator, my sister friend and doula, Adrienne Marie Brown. If y'all haven't read her book, Emergent Strategy and Pleasure Activism, y'all need to go to AK Press and go get that book now. But she did this when we were in Seattle, and we did what was really called popcorn lightning questions. So I'm going to give you a question, and you're going to try to answer it in like 1 sentence really quick, and then we're going to go to the next person to answer it. Okay? All right? And you can look ahead at those other questions if you want to try to get in your digs, but 1 sentence if you can, okay? And, you know, it could be 1 word too if you want, all right? All right. How do Pinayistas root activism in their hustle across industry and sectors? This is the focus of our Pinayista Summit. How do Pinayistas root activism in their hustle across industry and sectors? I'll just start. Self-care. Go.
Organize.
Solidarity.
Solidarity. Caroline?
I couldn't think of anything.
You can add a sentence. Since we only took a word, you can add a sentence. Or any of you can add one sentence, I should say. Or,
by educating, by education.
Yeah, I guess education.
I think that question is also speaking to those who, you know, Uncle Royal Morales, who was one of my mentors at UCLA, he used to say, everybody can't be an activist.
Right.
And Grace Lee Boggs, who was one of my mentors in Detroit, she used to say that too. Y'all can't be activists. Everybody can't be an activist. You can't all be scholars, right? But we can give our 3 T's, is what Uncle Roy used to say. We could give our time, our talents, or our treasure, or all 3. And I think that's really how we could really root our activism in the hustle. So, you know, maybe you're a rich engineer, maybe you're a corporate lawyer. So give your money then to those of us here who are activism or who are organizing communities who have no money, right? Or give your time. So the 3 T's: time, treasure,
talent.
Or talent.
Somebody asked my mother one time to give some money to a movement or something. She says, "Geez, I've already given you enough. I've given you five of my children."
I know that's right. I know that's right. I know that's right. Literally. Love you, Auntie Addie. Thank you. Love you. All right. 7, how can we deepen our Pinayism by understanding the events of our historical past in colonization, forced migration, and displacement? How can we deepen our Pinayism by understanding our historical past in colonization, forced migration, and displacement?
The answer is in the question. Our Pinayism is deepened by understanding how our identity as Pinays may be rooted in and is empowered by our history, struggle, and victories.
Absolutely. Kirin? Cindy?
No, I agree. I completely agree.
We can deepen it by understanding why we are divided and who divides us, so that so it prevents us from having unity. I think it's an important issue.
Super. Okay, last minute or 2, can you share your best practices? What works, what to avoid when organizing various communities? So whether you're working with seniors or college students, what are current asks and actions that folks can get involved in? What are your best practices to do?
My best practice, oh, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
My best practices with the Manilatown Heritage Foundation is actually making a point. I'm not saying that it's the best as an easiest. I'm just saying it's the best, is that making a point of the programming and producing is actually 3 generations of my community doing that. And it's not always an easy type of situation, but I feel like it has to happen. We have to have the 3 generations that are like able to work right now to work together to make change and to create like relevant programming.
I think you said it earlier. Everybody has something to give, whether it's seniors who say, I can't go to meetings. I have to safe distance, but I can call my Congress people. I can write a letter. I can give money. So it's finding that level of contribution to building the movement that us as organizers have to figure out. That's our job.
Yes.
I just to echo everyone else, I think there are three things. My social work background, which Uncle Roy was also one of the first Filipino MSWs, by the way. You have to start where the people are, right? Just like you had mentioned, not everyone's going to be an activist. Not everyone is okay to protest, but some folks are okay writing a letter, making a call to their congressperson, whatever it is, everyone has a role to play. The other point too is I think generationally, the communication styles are very different. So and Cindy already mentioned it, for us who are a little bit older, the younger folks are okay with texting. I mean, they're even doing therapy via texting. They're DMing, they're messaging. I have full-on conversations with these younger folks with my thumbs, and it amazes me they're okay with that. But for my younger organizers and my younger activists who are listening now, some folks need a conversation. Right? We can't leave our homes, like you mentioned. We are organizing in a pandemic, but I'm still amazed at the level of organizing and movement that has happened despite this pandemic. But at the end of the day, you have to form relationships and you have to form a community. Do not call people just when you want them to turn out for something. That's like my pet peeve. I won't hear from somebody for 5 years and suddenly they have a candidate. Right? They have a candidate that they want to run and now they want to talk to me about the community and what we need. I was like, what F were you before? So make sure in everything that you do, come at it with sincerity, authenticity. You can't fake that ish. People have to know where you've been. People have to know what work you've done and form those relationships and just listen. I know we're talking a lot. I'm talking a lot right now. But the best thing we can do is listen to each other and see where we can plug in and love on each other and support each other.
Amazing. One last word from all y'all.
No, just to add on, you have to love people to do this work, and you have to love them in order to commit your whole life to it.
Yes. And
have passion for it. And if you don't, well, I don't know if you'll make such a good organizer.
The late water rights activist in Detroit, Charity Hicks, said, wage love. We have to wage love instead of waging war. Wage love.
Amen.
I'm going to, Caroline and Kirin, do you have other last words? While I share some ads here.
Caroline, while you're thinking, I just want to echo Cindy again, too. I think a lot of times people misunderstand us because they see people angry with fists up. And what they don't understand is that we are doing this out of love. We defend out of love. We act out of love.
Yes.
And if we're not going to do it for our people and other marginalized people, who else is? They won't, right? Yeah. So yes, I agree. At the end of the day, that's why we do all this work.
Yeah, the opposite of love is not hate. It's actually apathy. So when we're angry about what's happening in our world, it's because we actually love America and we want her to get better.
Yes. I want her to love me back.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Love it enough to change it is what the James and Grace Lee Boggs used to say. On your screen are some of our sponsor ads here. Please support our Filipino American National Historical Society. We have an online auction next weekend, October 17th to 18th. Look at our Facebook page for that event and the links to the auction forms. I think I donated a few things, including a poem, a custom poem, if you'd like to bid on that, and a Donna Ballins in the heart bag too. October is Filipino American History Month. Please follow FANHS for our daily memes on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'll just leave you with some of these that have gone out. They look like this. They go out every single day during Filipino American History Month from our FANHS National and from our different chapters. Here's one for you, Caroline, on iHotel and housing activism. And also just want to call into the space the ancestor Amado Kaya Kanam Rodriguez, who we lost last August, the son of our sister friend, Dr. Robin Rodriguez. All right, with that, I want to thank you all for being here for our Pinay Activistas panel, and please continue on to Pinayista. Thank you.